Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Health Without the System. This is episode 45. I'm Dr. Tim Scott.
And I'm Mia Scott, guys. Welcome back. For our first-time listeners, welcome for the first time. If you're wondering, it's still not summer. It's like middle of May, and we just came in from feeding the chickens and putting them in for the night, and it is freaking freezing. So ready for this weather to change.
I'm pretty comfortable.
Nope, I'm not. He stayed inside with his, warm weather.
All
All
right.
right. Well, shall we dive in?
Yeah, this looks like a fun episode. So something we hear quite often is, I think I have adrenal fatigue. And I think it's the people who are a little bit more in tune with their bodies, maybe dabbling outside of traditional Western medicine, and they might sort of understand, hey, this is actually all connected. Cortisol, circadian rhythms, my adrenals, they read a little bit about it, and then they come to us with that.
Yeah, and actually for my patients who've had this before, you know that it is absolutely such a real feeling. But in Western medicine, this is something that's not really recognized as like adrenal fatigue is not a real thing.
It's not like a diagnosis.
Yeah, it's not like
you
you're
don't
not-
walk
you're
to
not
the
gonna
doctor,
diagnose-
say I'm
like
tired,
an ICD-10 code
and they're
get
like, oh,
adrenal
okay,
fatigue.
well, you have adrenal fatigue. Let's get that taken care of.
Right. But as we know, it is incredibly real. And if you tell somebody who's truly been in adrenal dysfunction that adrenal fatigue is not real, they will definitely come after you because let me tell you, it is real. And these are things that you can feel. Like maybe you're exhausted all day, maybe that you're wired at bedtime, but you cannot keep your eyes open during the day. You're crashing, that mid-afternoon crash, as I feel like a lot of us have. Maybe you're anxious for no reason or you can't pinpoint a reason, or just gaining weight desperately, trying everything you can, nothing is working. These are all can be signs of a dysregulated adrenal function or cortisol issues as well. So
HPA axis.
Yeah.
And again, I want to stress, because a lot of the things we talk about in each episode are not completely independent, meaning these are some of the same symptoms that you might have heard us mention in a low testosterone episode, maybe a parasite episode, various hormones, caffeine, coffee, wheat, gluten, sleep, right? Like this all kind of goes hand in hand. But again, the body is not independent, right? In traditional Western medicine, we're used to go see a kidney doctor for your kidneys and a heart doctor for your heart and a liver doctor for your liver, but it's all connected. It all communicates, and these systems play off of each other.
Yeah, so this is for our patients who, number one, just want to learn about a better lifestyle and how to support their adrenals, or number two, for the patients who have gone to multiple specialties, they still don't feel right despite normal labs. And if you guys are watching this in video, you can see my air quotes, normal labs. But we just know that they're not optimal. So this is just another potential diagnosis that we can put on the table to rule out, because adrenal fatigue is so real. And it's actually a lot more easy to happen than I feel like people would think, just because it's responsible for so much, which is our fight or flight response, and so many things that are connected to it. So let's break it down.
Absolutely. I love to talk physiology. And if we're going to talk about adrenal fatigue, you first have to understand what the HPA axis is. So first off, in functional medicine, we like to talk about these 7 nodes within your body, right? And you have this assimilation, which is how you take things into the environment. One of the nodes is the transportation, and then you have communication, and you have structural integrity
and elimination.
Right. And so there's all these different various things. And at the core of all that, we talk about the mental, spiritual, physical, emotional aspect of every human being. Anyway, this node, it's actually like a communication issue, your adrenals. So they use different signaling molecules. They talk to different parts of your body. And the HPA axis is sort of the world that the adrenals live in. So the HPA axis, without further ado, love talking about this part, really 3 main things. HPA, hypothalamus, that releases your corticotropin releasing hormone, pituitary gland, that releases your adrenocorticotropic hormone, and your adrenals. And there's different things in there, but you have different zones and you end up with different things. Your norepinephrine and epinephrine can come there, your cortisol and cortisone, and this all together is your survival circuit.
Very important. Yep. So your brain is constantly asking this question every single day. Are we safe? Are we in danger? And not even every day, most likely
throughout
every single
multiple
minutes.
times. Yeah.
Just
And we
all
talked
throughout
about that. Are we safe? Are we in danger? That's your sympathetic versus your parasympathetic nervous system. We went into that in a lot of detail. Which episode was it recently? For the love of God, I can't keep track of these anymore.
One of the
But anyway,
episodes.
the point
Listen
is
to
we'd
them all.
really like to be more in the parasympathetic nervous system, right? That's your rest, your digest, your non-stressed out state. That's what we're all aiming for. So.
But let's talk about how a short-term stressful state can actually be beneficial. So we've talked about cortisol before. I think do we have an entire podcast on cortisol? We
I
might
can't
have.
keep it straight anymore. I
Yeah.
really don't know.
We talk too
It
much
came up in
all the time.
inflammation,
Cortisol comes up a lot.
blue
It's very
zones.
important.
We were just talking about it in the blue zones a lot.
Yeah. So cortisol, it's great in the short term. But long term is where the issues can really just wreak havoc on your body. So a little bit of the physiology here: acute cortisol response. This is basically fuel mobilization. It can be helpful. So in short terms, think of increased in lipolysis, or breakdown of fats, releases fatty acids. The increase of gluconeogenesis, so increased production of glucose found in the liver, that can help raise blood sugar. This can help raise energy availability. It's basically an adaptive and performance enhancing. So think about a stressor like when you're working out. This is why I always tell my patients that are in true adrenal dysfunction or adrenal fatigue in the morning, do not be hitting it super hard with your cardio in the morning. You're already in an adrenal depleted state. Your cortisol, you don't want it to respond like that. So think of cortisol as good. It really is, but in doses, and too much can be a bad thing. So those are all the good things, and those are just very few of a ton of good things that cortisol can actually do for the body. But in small doses and in regulated environments, it is actually very helpful.
Yeah, and in that particular situation, you're discussing fuel mobilization.
Yeah.
So it's fight or flight. It's going into a sympathetic response. Let's break down the fatty acids or the fats, and we have free fatty acids for energy. Let's build more glucose. That's gluconeogenesis. Let's produce it. Get our blood sugar up. Let us do what we need to do.
And I gave an example of working out because that fits my lifestyle. What if you're walking down the street and you're passing somebody who looks like super sketchy, and then they cross the street, and all of a sudden you feel that adrenaline pumping, and that cortisol response is saying, okay, are we fighting or are we flighting? And you just, these are the things that keep you safe. Or if you're getting chased by a bear, those are things that are acutely going to very greatly benefit your body, but not in a chronic response. And we'll talk about how chronic and acute, your body doesn't recognize the difference. It doesn't think that doesn't understand that it's not being chased by a bear every day. If you're chronically living in this high stressful state, doesn't know the difference between a bear and just your typical
Yeah, it doesn't know a difference between a bear
and kids and a husband.
16 deadlines at work, and exactly.
And kids and a husband.
Yeah.
All right, so going into
I assume
chronic.
you mean other kids and husband, because it couldn't be us that you're
No,
talking
it
about.
could never be us. We're perfectly regulated. All right, so for chronic cortisol, problems, major problems.
Yeah.
Wreaks absolute havoc on your body.
Yeah, when you have these chronic elevated cortisol levels, it's constantly still looking for that energy. So it actually starts breaking down muscles, right? That's your proteolysis. Let's break down muscle because we need more energy. Maybe you've gone through your glycogen stores. You can't make any more glucose, or you can't do it fast enough. Maybe you've even broken down as much free fat as you can for free fatty acids. So when you're in that state, when you're breaking down muscle, you're absolutely not really undergoing protein synthesis, where you're, taking the building blocks and amino acids and making new protein structures. And your anabolic signaling, your things like testosterone and IGF-1. Those are the things that tell your body, hey, we're going to build muscle. We're going to break down fat. We're going to do the things people want to do, right? That's not good. So that, again, like Mia said, that's one thing. We're kind of focusing on one little area here, but that's one way to think about how chronic cortisol elevations can actually lead to increased fat stores, breakdown of muscles, stop making new muscle. And you can see how that can be a problem over time.
Yeah, your muscles basically become your amino acid bank, like Tim said, and your body just keeps withdrawing for them. It's basically a fuel source. That's just one step of it there. Like I said, there's so many different things that can happen negatively, but also chronic cortisol and insulin. Major driver of insulin. It's going to be a fat storage, so cortisol will
as we
raise.
were just saying, it's constantly breaking down, or it's gluconeogenesis, so it's building up
blood sugar.
Yeah, and
then
over
with
time,
blood sugar, remember, insulin is your driver into the cells with blood sugar. So as blood sugar rises due to cortisol, then you have insulin coming and saying, "Whoa, we have a lot of glucose in our system. We have a job to do to get it, into the cells of where it could be." But imagine if that is happening chronically, you're going to have problems. You can have insulin resistant based on stress. And honestly, I've had a few heart-to-heart conversations with some of my patients who quite literally are diabetic because of they are doing everything right and we're getting their numbers better, but it really comes down to incredible amounts of stress that is driving that cortisol, driving the insulin, driving insulin resistance, and fueling chronic disease.
Agreed. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, and I think it's important for listeners to understand if you're in traditional Western medicine, or maybe you know a little bit about metabolic health, you kind of are taught to think of insulin as a good thing, right? Like diabetics can't produce insulin, they take insulin.
Yeah.
We need to release insulin to get glucose into cells. But honestly, insulin's like that dude that you need, but is kind of a bad guy because it is a fat storage hormone. It is an inflammatory driver. All in all, you want the littlest amount of insulin that you need to get the sugar out of the cells and regulate the best you can.
Think of it very potent, but very toxic if it's too high. And then, of course, too low.
That's how you're insulin sensitive, by getting the smallest amounts.
So anyway, cortisol raises blood sugar. Insulin has to come in and basically play cleanup.
So the more insulin you have over time, the more that develops what we've called the insulin resistance. So your cells are kind of like becoming immune to it. Like, I'm going to need a little bit more of you if you want me to do this job. So now we need to produce more insulin to get the same results. Same concept as opiates, right? Like over time, you become a little bit resistant. You need more to do the same job.
Yep, absolutely. So break that down real quick. Chronic cortisol, chronic glucose elevation, chronic insulin secretion. That is how you get the insulin resistance. So even though cortisol can be breaking down fat, insulin is then right behind it, pushing fat back into storage.
Also breaking down muscle, not making new proteins to build new muscle, stopping things like testosterone and IGF-1. And you can see how that's a recipe for disaster.
And that's just a few things. That doesn't even touch on the inflammatory markers and the cytokines and everything else that spikes because of that too. So we're just talking about a few things that are very important to the body. But mind you, this is not just their sole job and of what happens to the body when these are dysregulated.
Yeah.
So fat gets redistributed, not just gained, and then cortisol favors that visceral fat storage, like Tim said.
Yeah. So I mean, again, like we talked about, the visceral fat has more glucocorticoid receptors, and fat is an organ. We've talked about this so many times. And like Mia said, it releases inflammatory cytokines and influences the cells around it. I always think of fat cells like I do that moldy grape, that makes the other 5 grapes. And grapes kind of even look like fat cells. I mean, not really, but little globules.
No, yeah, actually.
But anyway, so that moldy grape or blueberry that influences the ones around them and makes them go bad. Yep. That's what fat does. It has increased LPL activity. So it's causing more fat storage in the abdominal area, and that visceral fat takes on a life of its own. That's going to increase your belly fat, decrease that lean muscle mass, because remember, we're breaking proteins down, and sort of get into that loop of more and more fat storage, which then over time, when you break down muscle, is going to reduce your metabolism, right? So muscle is your biggest driver of basal metabolic rate. So you drop your muscle, you lose some of that metabolic rate, and now the furnace isn't burning as hot.
Yeah. Remember, muscle is your key to your metabolism. The more muscle mass you have, the more calories you burn at rest. And it is really interesting to think about fat when it's like Tim said, and when it gets big and it quite literally like explodes, and then it has these cytokine releasing effects. And like Tim said, one bad apple can spoil the bunch around it. So imagine that, growing and growing and growing. And it's just this constant release of very, very toxic inflammatory markers with obesity, which is why one of the biggest driving risk factors of death from the C word a couple years ago was having the more fat cells, because of the cytokine storm that it would release in this adipose tissue because of this type of reaction. So very important. The less fat you have, of course, the bad fat, the visceral fat, things like that, the less fat you have, the better off you're going to be, because the less inflamed you're going to be. And all the things. I mean, that's just one example, but very important on how just something so small can influence such on a large scale that you don't even think about.
Agreed. And we mentioned how as the muscle decreases, that lowers metabolism over time. You're resting your basal metabolic rate. But then also we've mentioned things like the thyroid, certain influence, right? Your body makes that inactive T4. It needs to be converted in liver and intestines to T3. What's something that, tissue? Yeah, and peripheral tissue. And what's something that reduces that? Well, increased fat mass is something that reduces that. Decreased muscle mass reduces that. So now all of a sudden you're affecting your thyroid. So now we've gone to adrenals and thyroids. Now, once your adrenals and thyroids start to decrease their overall, efficiency, what's next? Your sex hormones, which, that's outside scope at the moment, but important. And we've mentioned mitochondria. So you have mitochondria, which are the powerhouse of your cell in every cell of your body. And mitochondria efficiency will decrease. They'll actually get smaller. Mitochondria can plump up. They can be real big energy producing areas that are really super efficient, like high power engines. They can also shrink down, and they can really be kind of crappy, little tiny, like maybe a little Volkswagen Beetle with a little engine.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Analogy. Yeah, so basically what Tim's saying, metabolism slows over time. When things aren't working right, when things are inflamed, you're basically going to burn less and store more, because your body is not going to be as efficient. So cortisol will pull fuel out of storage in the short term, and if it stays elevated long enough, it will create the perfect storm for fat gain, muscle loss, all the things that we just talked about. And then, of course, like we said, regulates the inflammation. So the cortisol will suppress pro-inflammatory cytokines and immune cell activation, and it helping prevent excess or damaging the inflammatory response. But like we
But
said,
you
you
need
can't,
that inflammatory
yeah,
response over time,
we
right?
can't survive essentially without the cortisol, but dysregulated cortisol will wreck your system.
Yeah. All right. So moving on, talking about the foundation. So, here's something all those cardiologists who want your LDL to just be like 2 or 4 don't understand, right? We've talked about this before, but all of your stress hormones and your sex hormones start from the same place. Every steroid hormone in your body, cortisol, aldosterone, testosterone, estrogen, they all start from cholesterol. So a major way your body gets that cholesterol into hormone producing cells is through LDL. It's kind of that transporter. So this foundation is very important to understand. It's the precursor to essentially what the HPA axis does, or the release of this cortisol, right? So cholesterol goes in the mitochondria. The first step in the process, we were just drawing out the chart. What does it become?
Pregnenolone.
Okay, it becomes pregnenolone. Then from there, it can kind of go down various pathways. It depends on the tissue that it's in, but the adrenals will make cortisol and aldosterone and DHEA. Gonads, if it's in different gonads, like the testes and the ovaries, you might get testosterone or estrogen. And then fatty tissue, liver, brain, they can convert testosterone into estrogen via aromatase, right? And the whole system depends on a couple things: cholesterol, healthy mitochondria, proper signaling, and enough raw materials to function. So, we mentioned things like LDLs. You need micronutrients from your diet to support and catalyze these reactions. We've talked about methylation in the past. If that's off, some of these other systems can't go on appropriately. It's all connected.
Yeah.
It's a symphony.
Right. And just to shorten up what Tim just said, cholesterol is not the enemy. It is quite literally the raw material to make every hormone in your body. And this makes a difference. I was just talking to a patient the other day who's like, my cholesterol is great. She was here for me for hormone replacement here to me for hormone replacement therapy. And she's like, my PCP said my cholesterol is great. Great. It was 121 total cholesterol. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is really low. You can't make a lot of your other hormones without having that. And she lived an incredibly stressful life, which we'll get into. So bottom line, cholesterol is the precursor to every single hormone. Now, why does this matter? And why does this tie into the adrenal dysfunction that we're talking about? When your body is under chronic stress, it will prioritize survival over everything else, like we said. It is not going to care about making testosterone and estrogen and having babies and all the things and, functioning well. It's going to care about survival. That's all it cares about if you're in a survival state. So what this means, cortisol production will get prioritized in the downstream hormones, meaning every hormone that comes after it, and we'll argue
which are your sex hormones. Yeah.
Every hormone that comes after that will suffer. It'll have less production because your cortisol is taking first dibs, because like I said, your body will always choose to survive rather than make sex hormones.
Yeah, your mineral corticoids are going to come first. Your aldosterone and your cortisol your body's going to preferentially shift to those before it lets it go on and make testosterone, DHEA, and then testosterone, and then estrogen, and then everything that comes from those. So,
did we talk about the progesterone stealing here too?
No,
I don't know if we do, but if we get to it in our notes, I don't remember. But
I do think I put it in here.
Did you? Well, I just want to touch on this because remember,
it's coming up later.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so just remember that if your cortisol is pumping out the hormones after that, meaning after the pathway, after it converts, like the testosterone, estradiol, DHEA, DHEAS, all the things that we also need, is not going to be made as well because it's all going to cortisol. And then, real quick, which we'll apparently dive into later, is progesterone steal or cortisol steal. I guess it can go either way, but basically you'll pull more of that those molecules to make more of the cortisol, which means you'll have less progesterone and all these things. So think of a midlife perimenopause patient, super stressed out, already not making enough progesterone, and they're pulling even less progesterone because of the stress. So that is how you get that steal, and again, we'll dive into that.
Yeah, some people will argue that's more theoretical, but I can see it makes sense physiologically and
for sure
what happens. But anyway, all right, so that's kind of like the physiology behind it here. trying to have a decent understanding of what's happening in your body if you are experiencing some of these things or you're trying to talk to somebody about it. So, how does it all start? This is what we call triggers, right? So, you have things called antecedents, triggers, mediators. Antecedents are things that might have happened while your mom was pregnant with you, might have happened in early childhood. Maybe you had
Chronic,
multiple
yeah.
infections, antibiotics. Maybe it's the food you ate. Triggers are things that happen in life. Maybe you got really sick, you were hospitalized, really bad infection. And then mediators are sort of ongoing things that can continue to cause dysfunction in your body. So we discussed the HPA axis and we discussed the hormone production process. Now, what sets this all in motion? And generally, that's going to be some sort of antecedent, trigger, or mediator. In this case, probably a trigger or a mediator. So let's talk about a few of them.
First and foremost,
And by no means, I am not hiccuping.
you're
over here.
hiccuping again.
I think it's like acid reflux. But by no means are we going into every single antecedent,
No,
trigger, or mediator.
absolutely
We're
not.
going to try to talk about the things that may be
common.
most relevant to your life. Yeah.
Most common. Number one, sleep deprivation. If you're not sleeping, your body is going to assume that something is wrong. So what happens with that? You're going to have a decrease in melatonin and an increase in the nighttime cortisol, which means you're going to have a blunted morning cortisol or a poor cortisol awakening response. Go ahead.
What is the cortisol awakening response, right? It's hugely important for physiologic function. It's your body realizing you have woken up and you need to start your day, and boom, that cortisol level shoots up. Your body kicks it out. That sort of gets
It's
you
a
in
good
motion.
thing to have
It
a
is,
cortisol
yeah.
awakening response. And it goes with the circadian rhythm. So that's why we always say, wake up with the sun. You're supposed to wind down when the sun goes down. It is all based on your circadian rhythm and is response to melatonin and cortisol and all these other hormones in your body. But when you're in a sleep deprived state, things get dysregulated. So you can feel very wired and tired, like completely exhausted, but you can't go to sleep. Cortisol can be really responsible for keeping you awake. And then in the morning, when it's supposed to be morning time, when you're getting out of bed, when the sun comes up, you can have a blunted cortisol response, meaning it is not increasing, which means you ain't getting out of bed as easy as you need to be.
Agreed.
So sleep, number one,
Yep.
make sure your sleep is good, 7 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Number two, caffeine.
Yeah, which
For
again,
some.
we've
For some.
spoke about this, in the past. We don't really think caffeine's the enemy here. There are some people who do hundreds of milligrams of caffeine a day and use it effectively and efficiently for their body. So
I think it's the enemy when it becomes a dependent. So the question is, why are you dependent on caffeine? Caffeine, as long as you're tolerable, okay. But the question is are you dependent on caffeine? If so, then there's a different story to be told there.
right. But I do think you also have to understand, for the most part, caffeine isn't necessarily giving you energy. It's sort of borrowing it, right? So it stimulates adrenal signaling. It increases cortisol and some of those adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine. And this can just basically mask fatigue. Over time, as we just mentioned, sleep deprivation, you're sort of maybe getting a cortisol steal, burning through other nutrients, screwing up other hormones. It's going to worsen that HPA axis dysregulation and have downstream effects. So you just, again, like Mia said, you have to be careful. You have to make sure it's not stealing too much, doing it at the wrong time, screwing up your sleep, things like that.
Yep. Another very common thing to kind of crap out your adrenals is overtraining and under recovery. So basically, you're doing more, but you are recovering less. And this is that repeated sympathetic activation.
Too much
It's
sympathetic.
Yep.
Too much sympathetic. Going to increase your baseline cortisol levels, decrease that recovering signaling. A good way to learn your body on that is through the wearables. I mean, we've talked about the Oura Rings, the Whoop bands of the world.
Yep.
I didn't really pay too much attention to stress or recovery until I started wearing that.
Yep.
And I definitely think it has made a positive difference.
I think
I've
too.
been better about sleep, more intentional about getting to bed earlier. I would stay up later with blue screens before. I would get binge watching a Netflix show. I don't know. It's been really good for me to track that on my body.
I think it's been different for my workouts. So there's I was feeling good a couple months ago and I would strength train 5 days a week. And then I would realize that my recovery wasn't there. My heart rate wasn't dropping low. No matter, I would add in my magnesium as normal. I couldn't get a good recovery until I started dropping back down to 3 to 4 days a week. I was just strength training too long and too hard where I was not getting the proper recovery. And my Oura Ring was very clear about that. So those are things that are just little tidbits to say, okay, I need to allow my body to recover more. So I either do less extensive workouts more often, or I still hit the gym hard and just do less of those frequencies and then walk in the, interim days. So pay attention to your body. The more you know about the body, the better you can do for it.
Agreed. This is a big one. Under eating or low calorie intake. So This is probably bigger in the quote unquote healthy people, but also the people who maybe yo-yo diet, or maybe people who are overweight and have decided I'm going to fix this. The way to lose weight, the way to maintain a healthy weight is not by any means starvation. We say that to all of our weight management patients. We say that to everyone we talk to, right? You need to get energy. You need good calories. You want it from real, whole, nutrient-dense foods. You want to avoid the processed food. We never have anyone count calories. I mean, it's so rare.
Yeah.
We have people count protein. We do want you to track and understand your protein. But if you're eating meats that come from the earth, if you're
Whole
eating
foods.
fruits and vegetables, dairy, things like that, you are really not going to consume too much. You're just not. You're not going to be able to. If anyone on here can eat 2,000 calories of broccoli, send me a video of it, and I'm going to send you a $50 gift card.
Incredibly mind-blowing.
Please don't do that. Actually, I don't want you to do that.
that
It'd probably make you sick.
Probably make me throw up.
That's a lot of broccoli.
Yep, bad news bears. A lot of sulforaphane, though.
Anyway, so when you don't eat enough, when you're not getting enough energy, one of the things that's going to do is you're going to increase cortisol to mobilize fuel. All those things we said earlier. It's going to break down fat. It's going to form glucose. It's going to break down muscle. The other thing, it's going to screw up your thyroid. Thyroid is a driver of your metabolic rate along with your muscle. Those things communicate. And overall, that's going to lead to decreased metabolic efficiency. It's going to lead to losing the good things about you, the muscle mass, right? Yeah, you might burn a little bit of fat, but if you lose muscle, it's not going to matter in the long run.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
You need nutrients.
Another big thing, hormones. When hormones are off, the stress signaling will follow. So a couple, examples, low progesterone is a less calming GABA effect. So you can have an increase in some of these responses like the cortisol response, and then low testosterone, low estrogen, the same thing, a decrease in resilience to stress.
Amongst many other things, right?
Thyroid, insulin resistance, diabetes, high stress, like all of those are going to have a direct tie to adrenal issues. Adrenal dysfunction is what we like to call it. Or if you have a crazy flat cortisol curve, then, the total burnout that we would consider it. But
yeah, we already mentioned sleep, circadian rhythms kind of go with that. I understand sometimes your job may dictate when you sleep, but if you have the ability to follow a better circadian rhythm, decreased, blue light before bed, this is all very important to help keep that normal if you can do that. Mm-hmm. Gut dysfunction, we talk about this all the time, but this is massive. This is a completely unrecognized driver of not only adrenal fatigue and HPA axis problems, but skin problems, immune issues. I mean, just everything. So anyway, we've mentioned it many times, just briefly. One of the big things that will happen is a breakdown of that gut barrier, increased intestinal permeability. Things like LPS, lipopolysaccharide, is an endotoxin that can come off foods and different bacteria, will activate your immune system. Cytokines, we've mentioned this a lot. Think of those as inflammatory triggers. They stimulate the HPA axis. I heard there's a pharmaceutical company trying to develop, I don't know if it's a vaccine or a medication that actually targets a kind of AGE receptor, so the advanced glycosylated end products. So we've talked about these before. They're called AGEs, advanced glycated end products. And when you have different proteins,
you get them from very processed
or
sugary
fats
foods
that interact with heat. So like a donut, right? So that's a fried ball of dough. Honestly, even certain meats that are good on the grill, you can get advanced glycated end products. But there's a specific one called RAGE. These RAGE receptors for advanced glycated end products. So I read that there's a pharmaceutical company coming out with either a vaccine or a medication that targets RAGEs, the receptor for these. And if you can turn off the receptor, then essentially
that is
it's
so disgusting.
Crazy. So anyway,
that is so disgusting. Why? Just why? I can't imagine what that's going to turn into.
I know. Who knows where that's going to go.
Horrible
Because
idea.
we're going to figure out what else those receptors end up doing. And I tell you, it's going to be something that you need. That's what we're going to figure out.
We're going to find out real quick what the...
Oh, turns out the RAGE, the receptor for these, is also the anti-cancer receptor. And everyone's going to have gut cancer.
Yeah, by the way, we shut off your immune system, which blows my mind that there's still there's that medication out there that really does that. Don't even get me started. Anyway. Okay, so bottom line of that one, stress gut, stress nervous system, they're going to go hand in hand. They are direct
If you're
connection.
listening to this podcast and it's not your first time, you better know how important your gut is.
Yeah, we should start giving our audience a quiz at the end.
Yeah.
You guys should know us.
They'd be turning us off before the quiz. Like, okay, I'm out.
Quiz time. All right, next one, toxic environmental load. This is also a big one because we are just living in a toxic sludge. If you are not trying to do anything that you can to get out of your toxic sludge, you're living in it. And your body will treat these toxins of course, as a threat because they are. And, the detox pathways will demand energy, and chronic exposure equals increased in cortisol signaling, especially my mold. Mold, it will burrow in mitochondria, wreak havoc on your body, create biofilms, basically making it non-recognizable or recognizable, but your body really can't do much about it. Really pisses your body off. So anyway, and the bottom line of this one, nobody has one single trigger. I mean,
we just went through like 6 of 5 million.
Right. And most of us can have multiple of these triggers simultaneously. So you can have 5, 6, 7 triggers going at once, which is
think about this, right? So you're sleep deprivated, so you're having excess caffeine every day. There's 2 we just talked about. You're also working out and you're trying to make up for the fat you're seeing, so you're working out 4 days a week, but you're trying to lose weight, so you're under eating, and you're probably eating advanced glycated end products because it's not the cleanest diet.
And
now your hormones are off
because your gut wasn't right.
Your gut's
so now
not
you just
right.
got
There's
an
7
antibiotic
triggers.
and
Toxins because you spray your Axe on and you put your loaded shampoos and perfumes and your Glade plug-in in the wall.
I think we just summed up 98% of the population.
Yeah, and we still could probably keep going, but we'll shut up before people are like, oh my God, I'm going to die if I keep listening to your podcast.
You can change it. But anyway, real quick, let's dive into the patterns first before we talk about some things to do. Jump into the phases.
So we basically look at this as like 3 different phases, and the easiest way to remember it is getting there a little bit worn out and exhausted for your adrenals, right? So phase 1 is kind of wired but tired.
Yeah, this is high cortisol, anxiety, insomnia. So basically, and there's actually, I should have mentioned this before, getting a single cortisol serum, not much.
I think we do talk
we do?
about
Okay,
labs,
so real quick, I just want to go over this. That way we can put why we're talking about this. You really want, if you want the absolute best accuracy, it's going to be a 6-point cortisol curve where it's saliva. Right. So when you look at phase 1, when you're talking about high cortisol, anxiety, insomnia, this could be an elevation of cortisol all throughout the day, higher than what that mountain trend should be. So you're basically running in a hyper state all day, and then you're crashing at night. So that persistent HPA axis activation keeps the cortisol and the adrenaline elevated and driving that sympathetic dominance and overstimulation of the nervous system. So you basically feel like a ball of anxiety. Maybe you're pacing around at work, pacing around your house. Where's the next thing? It almost feels like a hypoglycemic response. You feel shaky, jittery, a little bit anxious. That is what we would consider the phase 1.
We call it wired but tired.
Yep. So that would be the phase 1.
Yeah.
And when we say phases, like I said, think of a provider looking at a scale a curve of what we can see things going on. Number 2.
If we actually ordered these multi-point cortisol tests, which we'll talk about, it makes a nice curve and that you should follow, and you're somewhere, good or bad on it. So.
And these are what we would expect symptoms to be when we pair them with a specific cortisol curve. Number 2, phase 2 is just what we would consider a dysregulated one. So maybe it's the wrong timing, wrong place, wrong time. Well, you'll have crashes, brain fog, and the normal, what we consider a diurnal cortisol rhythm, will kind of flatten out a little bit, leading to impaired cognitive functioning, morning activation, inappropriate elevations later in the day. It's just dysregulated.
Yeah, you're not going to see the same or the normal cortisol awakening response. It's going to be a little bit blunted in the morning, and you're not going to have that peak that helps get you through the day. It's just going to stay flat. So this one is a little bit more tired. You're not really wired but tired. You're just kind of tired. You're having a little trouble getting out of bed. Like Mia said, your thoughts are a little bit off. This is phase 2, and it's a sign that you're progressing in this adrenal fatigue or this adrenal burnout. Mm-hmm. And then phase 3
and then there's phase 3. There's phase 3, which is burnout. And this is where essentially we would tell people or they think that my adrenals have failed, but they didn't. So remember, your body is very, very smart, and what is happening when this burnout is essentially happening. And by the way, this curve is
it's pretty flat. The cortisol is not changing. You're just not making much. At this point, you have decrease of corticotropin releasing hormone, decrease of adrenal corticotropin releasing hormone, and ultimately decreased to very little cortisol output. And this is an adaptation, right? It's chronic stress leading to a central downregulation of that HPA axis. It reduces signaling from the hypothalamus and pituitary because it wants to limit further cortisol exposure and protect the tissues. It's like, hey, we're building a ton of fat. We're breaking down. We've broken down all of the fat. We've made so much sugar. Now we're getting the deposits. Our insulin levels are high. We're insulin resistant. Our muscles are broken down. We got to do something here, body. Let's stop making cortisol.
Yeah. So, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing for patients because when I've had some patients that are in true burnout, I mean, they feel miserable. And when you think of I have adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout or adrenal dysfunction or failure, whatever you want to call it, it's not necessarily saying that they failed. Is exactly like Tim said. Your body is incredibly smart, and when it senses danger, it's going to do what it knows best, and that's to protect itself. So what happens, like he said, when you're so burnt out like that, your adrenals will say, "Listen, we can't do this anymore. Cortisol is too toxic to be running this high. We got to shut it off," which is why you feel like death. You can't get out of bed. You're so tired. You can't keep your eyes open. You're sleeping during the day. Trust me, I know I had a diurnal pattern that was very similar to this stage, and I felt like the worst I've ever felt in my entire life. Then it, correlates to thyroid dysfunction and all these other things. But it's not necessarily saying that like it failed you, it actually protected you, but it's giving you signs that you have to fix this because you can't live without no cortisol, but you also can't live running where your cortisol is lighting everything on fire that it comes in contact with.
Yeah, agreed. Your adrenals didn't fail. They did their job. We've said this before. Your body does exactly what it's supposed to do when based on the stimulus as you put into it.
Right.
So here's where we were going to mention the cortisol steal. We'll just reiterate it one more time. Boils down to a simple fact. When stress is very high, your body prioritizes cortisol production. It prioritizes that over your DHEA, your testosterone, and your estrogen. So downstream, you're going to have a lot of significant effects. And we actually talked about that, but the cholesterol gets turned into pregnenolone, which is the shared precursor, but the increased adrenal corticotropin hormone signaling actually pushes that pathway toward cortisol, doesn't let it really continue with the 1720 lyase over to DHEA, which then ends up at your sex
all
hormones.
down your sex hormones. Yeah. So basically think about like this graph and then you have cortisol that's like the second one down. But if you're demanding a ton of that cortisol production, then everything else surrounding that it's supposed to go down the road and make everything else, it just doesn't happen the way we want it to because your body, remember, is prioritizing life.
Yeah.
It wants to survive.
And why does this matter clinically, right? Because during these higher chronic stress episodes, think how many times, and I'm sorry, but here I imagine a woman saying this, like, I'm stressed out. I have no sex drive, right? I'm in a bad mood. I'm not sleeping well, and it's stress. It's adrenal fatigue. It's burnout. It's your body has been doing this. You've been going too hard. You haven't been prioritizing yourself, your mental, your spiritual, your emotional. It's not balanced, and you got to recognize that.
Right.
It's not a pill that fixes this, right?
And I do agree with Tim's how would I want to say this observation because females do regulate hormones significantly different, and our level of hormones are significantly different than men. And obviously, to be honest, if I had a testosterone level of a man, I probably wouldn't give two rats booties anyway myself. So like I feel like we're just adapted a little bit better.
What do you mean? You wouldn't give two rats booties about what?
Like I feel like you guys just run at a higher state. Like you guys just aren't stressed nearly as much as females are.
No, most men truly are.
Their hormones are different. Their hormones are more regulated. They don't have like a lot of the surge pulses that our female hormones do. So we can just be crazy.
Yeah, but you guys also have the power because when we're like start to get like that, you just have sex with us and then we forget about everything else. We're like, okay, we're cool. It's good. Let's go back.
They're trained well. Anyway, yeah, and then we're still low libido, can't sleep, can't think, but don't worry, we don't got a crappy husband. But yeah, so, clinically we got to regulate our stress, but he is right. It does impact females more, but I do think that goes back to just our normal adaptation in our chapter of our lives are just different. We bear so much more mentally than I feel like men do. Not to say that they don't have a lot of on their shoulder, but I swear to the Lord, I'm like, where's the kids every single second? Tim's like, what kids? I haven't seen them in a couple days.
I'm like, they're fine.
It's just different, but it does impact. I do think it impacts females more. So take that with what you will, but these are things that, it definitely can impact men, but more women.
So it's getting long. Let's talk about testing. This is what matters to a lot of people. And I think this is where people get misled and it's probably worth talking about. You mentioned this earlier, one cortisol level. Listen, I'm not going to call it useless, but it's not the greatest. It can be misleading, right? We've talked about this. Cortisol is a rhythm. It's not a single number. If you are going to get one, you should get one in the morning. We'll talk about that in a minute. But remember, cortisol is a curve. You kind of need to know what's happening throughout the day. But as a lot of prominent speakers have said to us, and as we've learned in our own practice, if you listen to the patient, if you listen to yourself, if you listen to your body, you don't need cortisol testing. You can figure it out.
Right. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Meaning if you look at these patterns paired with the symptoms, you can basically guess pretty good guess on what that cortisol curve is going to do just based on how you're feeling.
But if you are steadfast on getting a cortisol level checked, and it's going to be from your serum, and it's only going to be a single number, you probably want to try to get your cortisol awakening response. The only problem is that's going to be pretty hard because you need to do that within about 30 to 45 minutes of waking up. I don't know how many people wake up and get to a lab within 30 to 45 minutes.
No. And
However,
it's best to be a serum
if
or
you
a
happen
saliva.
to be with, a company that maybe does a home blood draw or some way,
Yeah.
and you have the choice as to when to check your blood, do it in the morning. Again, 30 in that window, very tight, 30 to 45 minutes after waking up, so you can get a cortisol awakening response.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is also it's kind of nice to know what it was before that and then the 45 minutes later, but you should at least see a spike. It should be high.
Yeah.
So a normal cortisol curve, you should have a high AM number, a gradual decline throughout the day, and lowest at night.
Which makes total sense. We need that big boost in the morning to get started with our day, and then it slowly declines so we're restful at night. And if your timing is off, of course, everything is going to feel off while we're laying in bed with our eyes open, twiddling our thumbs. So things like that. Best test, first and foremost, this is our favorite 4-point, or if you can, 6-point.
Yeah, 6-point is the best test.
The like gold standard. And it's because it gets the cortisol. When Tim and I have done this, when I'm saying like your awakening response, I mean it. Like we laid out our samples because it's a kit, it's a saliva sample, and we lay our kit out. And the second you open your eyeballs, you're spitting in there right away. And then you do another one 30 minutes later. And then so you do 6 throughout the day. But it's very accurate on getting those immediate responses.
Yeah, the only thing that we did that was stupid on our part or my part was
you work night shift or something, didn't you?
no, I was traveling to Georgia to work the
that's
night
right.
shift. So I literally was like spitting in the tube for my 2 p.m. as I'm walking through the airport. Like clearly that's
so
going to
clearly he's not going to have a high cortisol response from the
so-
airport.
But the 6-point salivary test, and if you can do cortisol through salivary, that's the way you want to do it. If you have to get a blood cortisol level, you want to be fasted. You want to get it around 8 a.m. That's going to capture the peak, and it's going to avoid food-related variability because that will shift your cortisol levels.
Mm-hmm.
A random spot check of cortisol in the middle of the day is like checking your heart rate once and trying to diagnose your fitness. Like just at 2
not
p.m.,
gonna work.
check my heart rate. Cool, it's 86. I guess I'm in
good.
shape.
Heart attack
you
free.
know? Yep.
Which is crazy because oddly enough, and this is not to shame providers because let me tell you, I did not learn this in school.
No, I
but I
wouldn't
do
have known it.
see this often on patients' labs. I will have one single cortisol serum draw, and then I'll ask them, and I'll see it be time stamped, and nothing was fasted. It's like 3 p.m. and I'm like,
when did you get this done? Did you fast?
Yeah. Did your provider tell you needed to go before 8, 9, 9, 8? No. Okay. Well, you just throw that right out the window.
Yeah, that's useless.
And then they'll
just
say,
so you know.
"Well, my cortisol's fine," and then I hear their story, and I'm like, "It's not fine." Like,
No, it's not.
you're not
That's
okay.
another tip of the day. And unless told otherwise, just always be fasted when you're getting blood work done.
Yeah,
if
just-
possible.
yeah, be
you
fasted
always
for
want to
sure.
be fasted.
So what do we do with this disaster of our adrenals dysfunction?
We'd get a pill prescribed to us, right?
Wrong. All right, step 1, calm the system. You know, if things are on fire, try to put the fire out. Things that are so simple but can make a difference. Sunlight, first thing of the day. If you have a room that you can get ready in as the sunlight is waking up, as you're waking up, if you can have the curtains open to wake up with the natural circadian rhythm, get out and walk in the nature. That is super grounding, can lower cortisol. Meditation, journaling, breath exercises, things that are chalked up to woo-woo. It really does work and help reduce that cortisol stimulation.
It's not woo-woo.
It really does.
It does things.
It reduces that stimulation. Your body, like I said, your body's very smart. When you get in that state of mind, it will do it. So it can reset your circadian rhythm and, of course, will improve that cortisol timing. And,
Guys, eat correctly.
you gotta,
Step 2.
You got to eat right.
You got to eat right. We've talked about this before. When your body sort of subconsciously chooses a pathway that it's going to go throughout the day metabolically based on what you eat first. If you choose carbohydrates, cereal, bread, bagels, your body says,
Oatmeal.
your body says, guess what? Today's going to be a fat day. We're going to release some insulin. We're going to store that glucose. We're going to get fat.
We're going to be hungry in an hour.
But if you choose protein early in the day, your body's like, oh, we're going to build some muscle today. Low insulin, we're going to break
blood
down
sugar.
fat, low blood sugar, we're going to build muscle, we're going to increase our basal metabolic rate, we're going to do good things today.
We're going to stabilize
Gotta
your
eat
cortisol,
right.
have, decreased brain fog, all the things. Keep you fuller, faster, fuller, longer. Who doesn't want that? So start the day right. Whatever your first meal of the day is, I don't care if it's breakfast. I get life is crazy, and I get some people aren't hungry for breakfast. That's okay. But your very first meal of the day, feed your body right. And for the love of God, I'm tired of people telling me that they eat healthy foods, and they are not. So
And
you
they're garbage, yeah.
cannot. And kudos for trying. We're not shaming you for trying.
Right.
It's the patients that refuse to feel better when they are like, all they do is say, I feel so crappy, XYZ, whatever the case may be. And I'm like, But you just told me that you wake up every morning and you have a Jimmy Dean frozen croissant thingy. I don't even know what they're
McMuffin
called.
sandwich thing.
Yeah, like basically
it is a
death.
croissant. I think
It's
you're right.
so dumb.
That's called an advanced glycated end product.
Yeah,
right
it's
there.
called diabetes and insulin resistance and
Yeah.
all these things that I'm trying to prevent you for. So, moral of that story of my little tangent here, you have to eat right or a lot of these things can't get fixed.
Yes, and be open to continuously improving. So when we first started this journey a few years back, I had Premier Protein on the list as something for people to drink, and Mia was kind of like, "Don't put that on there. It's got a bunch of seed oils, a lot of ingredients. It's not a clean product at all."
gross.
And I was like, I understand that, but a lot of people have access to it and they like it, and if I can at least get them in the protein wagon, it's a good place to start. Well, since then, I've removed that style of thinking because I've advanced. But wherever you're at, continue to get better, right? If you start to read ingredients and you look at something that you're doing a lot, be like, oh man, this really isn't clean. It's got 13 ingredients, 2 seed oils. I can't pronounce 3 of those names. Okay, it's time to find a cleaner product. So challenge yourself to do better.
And that's where that like battle came for me, because I'm like, listen, I'm never ever going to recommend something to somebody else that I wouldn't eat myself. I wouldn't give those Premier protein shakes to my dog. Like, that's just, and they're in the hospitals. They're the main like source of protein for sick patients. It blows my mind. It has a shelf stability longer than most humans. It's just disgusting.
And real quick, this is, if you think you are in, based on what we've said this episode or whatever research you've done, if you think you are in a stage of adrenal fatigue, this is not the time to really be doing big intermittent fasting. You actually need some consistent meals. You want those protein heavy, low carbohydrates, but you need to constantly feed your body to prevent the different sugar creation, the fat breakdown, the muscle breakdown. So take a little break from the fasting. That's too much strain, not enough recovery.
Yeah. And off of Tim's point, if that's you who's not only in a cortisol dysfunction and drinking Premier protein shakes, it's okay. Fix the protein shakes later, but fix your cortisol first, because that's what's going to like really make you feel like crap. Circle back around to cleaning up your protein shakes after you fix your cortisol.
Yep. Take a listen to podcast episodes 3 and 4 from way back when, spring of last year.
So we went over calm the system, eat correctly, sleep. You got to sleep. Reduce that stimulation of the blue light. Have a very consistent schedule. I can't tell. I told him this morning when we woke up, we had 2 nights in a row that we slept or we went to bed really late. And my really late is like midnight. It's very late.
No, your really late is like 11 p.m. We were up until like 2 a.m. on Friday night.
It was not that late.
Yeah, I think it was.
I think, well, the other one was 12. The other night. Anyway, 2
and then
nights in a
Saturday
row,
was like 12:30. Yeah.
I physically could not get out of bed. Like it was like an act of God. I like rolled out and fell on the floor, and I'm like, what happened to me? I felt, and I don't drink. And I felt like I had the biggest like brain fog hangover ever. And it's because I wake up like clockwork every single day. I go to bed like clockwork and I wake up like clockwork. In just those 2 days of abnormal sleep patterns destroyed me on a Monday morning.
I think Grandma Maria gets out of bed better than you. She's what, 85?
Yeah. Well, look at it. No, just chilling with their friends, chilling with their homies. Give me that life, man. One day. But anyway, my point is stay consistent with the sleep. You have to have a consistent schedule. I promise you, your circadian rhythm, your cortisol, your adrenals, everything will thank you. And then, of course, like we said, train smart. Don't overtrain.
You have to lift. If you can, within your means, lift weight.
Don't overtrain. And let's be
overdo it.
honest, majority of the Americans are probably not overtraining. But if you're super sore, where the next time you go to work out, you physically can't move your legs because of the workout you had 2 days ago, majorly work a different muscle group and don't touch the one that you just did, or just take a day off, do the walking with a weighted vest. Train smart. Do not put your body in a higher pissed off inflammation state.
Yep. And there's definitely some supplements that you can use to support your journey. You cannot supplement your way out of bad health. There's a very specific reason we're mentioning this at number 5 behind things like calming the system, eating correctly, sleeping, training correctly. Supplements do not fix the problem, but they can help you.
These are just a few adaptogens, and it depends on what phase you're in. If you think that you can kind of gauge the phase by what we were saying for symptoms, then by all means, look it up on what you think that could be supportive for adaptogens. But overall, magnesium can calm the nervous system. Ashwagandha, I love ashwagandha. It's
and that's good for
modulator.
Any phase, beginning to end of your adrenal fatigue journey.
It's also great for mood disorders, a little bit of, like seasonal depression type thing. Rhodiola, it can build up that resilience.
That's good in that middle phase, like maybe you're past wired but tired, but you're not quite to complete burnout. Rhodiola is good to add in.
Yep.
Phosphatidylserine is a good one to put in there too.
For lowering of the nighttime cortisol if you feel like you're wired and tired. And then Panax ginseng, if the things are really bad, then that would be like the stage 3 burnout. The Panax ginseng would be great. And this isn't perfect. You have to fix all the other things. Fix your gut, inflammation, toxins, hormones, all the things. And just to give you a quick background, I will be short because this actually is like very near and dear to me because this happened to me and my cortisol or my curve was horrific. And I've never felt so bad in my life than I did when I had an incredibly stressed job and all these other things that correlated with it. And I made it a very, very a good point to fix all of this. And I woke up every morning at the same time. I did red light therapy every day, 5 days a week. Red light therapy, can help regulate hormones, can help reduce stress, can help wake up with the wakening response. Great for your mitochondria. So I did red light therapy. I also took an adrenal support that we have actually on our website. I did a T150 support because my thyroid needed some help as well. And then I stopped all running. I used to run. I stopped running and I did more weightlifting. And I used all of that and I corrected myself naturally.
You also had ashwagandha.
I did ashwagandha. I did 300 or 600. I think I did 600 milligrams of ashwagandha. And just a couple other things, but then it did not come without lifestyle. Like I made sure that I was doing all of those things to feel better. And let me tell you guys, there's no way in hell that I could continue to do what I'm doing with that type of adrenal burnout. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say like getting out of bed, it felt so hard. And even once I got up and running, it was my entire day was like, I need a nap. And that's not me. And so it happened to be when we were doing these adrenal issues. And I got a cortisol test or a 6-point cortisol test. And I was like, holy God, do I feel this bad? And this is what we used to fix it. And that was zero pharmaceuticals. These were supplements, lifestyle change, reining in what I could. And
zero pharmaceuticals, supplements, but no prescribed pharmaceutical medications, no sleep medicines, no anti-anxiety medicine, and you don't need those things. Right. I mean, most people don't need those things.
No, but it took work, Yeah. I knew I wasn't going to do it pharmaceutically.
And it took time.
Yeah, I was this close to giving myself a thyroid medication because I had that much of a thyroid dysfunction where my hair was falling out in quite literal chunks. But
even so, if you were going to do the combined, it was going to be a T4, T3.
Yep. And I'm not kidding when I say I quite literally picked up the prescription and it sat in my cupboard and I'm like, I don't want to take this. I know why it's dysregulated. I can fix it.
And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you need the T4, T3. But I think you just really wanted to see how much you could accomplish through lifestyle and supplementation.
And I did. And I got it to normal functioning. My hair stopped falling out. I actually got antibodies to 0 with my thyroid. It really made a massive difference in my life. And I was really proud of that to say to my patients who have gone through this as well, to say that it's okay if we have to use medications to get to our destination, but you don't have to.
And also don't think that prescription written in the doctor's office is going to fix you, right? It's not. Right. It's a Band-Aid unless you are making the corrective actions, root cause medicine, root cause health. Go ahead.
I have this conversation with my patients too, and they're like, I'm so busy. I'm a CEO, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, nothing that you tell me is going to get corrected unless you, I'm sorry, fix your job. And sometimes that's the only way out if you're that dysregulated, unfortunately.
And your life, just everybody's busy in their own way, right? Like all of us feel the same stresses, whether you're a CEO or, whether you stay at home or you run your own business, right? We all feel stress and you all have to find ways to modify that.
And actually that I forgot to even mention that was during my highest stress life ever where I was so dysregulated. I was working a corporate job. We were building Rixa. We were doing so much and I was just in a massive adrenal burnout. So what did I do? I left a really crappy toxic life or a job, not a life. It was a really poor way to run, but we, focused all the apples where we need it to be with Rixa and everything else. And really to drive the company. But it wouldn't have been easy, obviously, and it wouldn't have been fixed if I didn't take those lifestyle approaches. So
we got the kids calling us trying to go to bed here.
Yeah. So hopefully, bottom line, you don't need more energy. You don't need more caffeine. You don't need more medication. Some do need medication. That's okay. But you need better regulation, better lifestyle change, better, ability to recognize that change is needed. If you want things to change in your life, you have to change. And there's no other way to do that. Unfortunately, there's nothing super easy. So anyway, anything closing for you?
Nope.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. I hope this resonated with you with this episode. Like, share, follow. Check us out at rixahealth.com.
Disclaimer.
And where you can get our supplements. You can see the adrenal fatigue the adrenal dysfunction that I took and see the T150 and all the things, but we are off to put our kiddos to bed. Thank you. This podcast is for This podcast is for education and conversation, not medical advice. It is not a replacement for personalized care, diagnosis, and or treatment. Always talk with your own healthcare provider before making changes to your health, medications, and or lifestyle. Our goal is to give you better questions, better understanding of disease, and more ownership of your health. Knowledge is power. We will see you next week.